So the only thing then we should just probably check if the video isn't playing, just shout, and we'll have to just skip the videos just because it's broadband.
Yeah, sure. And I can circulate the slides with the video on at a later date.
Yeah.
Okay.
Hopefully it'll work. You know what this IT is like.
Sure. Right. Welcome to the University of Sunderland's Project Changemaker, all funded by our University Silver Award and the sterling support of the Futures team, may I add. I know that many of you tuned in yesterday, but I just want to go over the two phases of Project Changemaker. Phase 1, to attend the lectures from Tuesday to Thursday. I mentioned yesterday, one of the presentations is recorded, so we're going to release that Wednesday after Wednesday's lecture. And what you have to do, you have to submit a 60-second video sales pitch. All students will receive a certificate of attendance. And from that, the top 15 students from having viewed the video presentations, the recorded presentations, will go through their virtual placements, 6 weeks, half a day a week, in which you'll be expected to tackle an organizational challenge or problem. But you have a mentor, a university mentor, and a dedicated person, member of staff in the particular company that you're allocated to. And at the end, you'll give a presentation on your recommendations to the problem or challenge. You will receive a testimonial from that organisation, a Changemaker trophy, and £150. And also, the top 4 students, whilst on placement, will receive an additional £500 with an extended virtual placement, approximately two weeks extra. So if you haven't registered formally now, we will send an additional link out at the end of this session and tomorrow morning. Spread the word with your colleagues. Project Changemaker is open to all students across the university. I'll answer questions specifically relating to Project Changemaker at the end of the presentation. Thank you. Our guest presenter today is Jemima Bird. Jemima is the founder of Hello Finch, a specialist brand marketing collective designed for the gig economy. Jemima has led a transformation of a number of well-known brands, including Moss Bros, Trainline, and Bella Italia. Most recently, Jemima led the brand relaunch of Cope's food business, including development of its iconic new design across advertising, in-store, and a UK first, a product placement deal with ITV's Coronation Street. Jemima works with startup brands right through to multi-million-pound companies. Jemima is also a senior non-executive director of the Revolutions Bar Group, senior trustee of the Football Foundation, the UK's largest sporting charity, and a trustee of ParkPlay, a charity dedicated to ensuring everyone can, #meet, move, play. A lifelong cricket fan, Jemima also supports Liverpool FC. And when she isn't watching cricket or football, Jemima is a prolific marathon runner. Having already completed 5 out of the 6 world marathon majors, she is seeking the coveted 6-star medal in Tokyo 2021. The title of Jemima's presentation is, How Do I Manage to Get a Naked Bloke in the Window of 140 Moss Bros stores? Over to you, Jemima.
Thanks, Derek. That's some introduction. Hi, everybody. Right, we're just going to see if we can get the screen to share. So if I do this, Derek, you tell me if this is coming up. Has that worked?
Yes.
So has everybody's got it, have they?
Yes, they will do.
Just bear with me then. And that's on full screen, yeah?
Yes, full screen.
Brilliant. Okay, everybody. Well, as I say, thank you, Derek, for that introduction. I'm going to spend probably an extra 30 or so minutes just taking you through how I managed to get a naked bloke into 140 shop windows. First of all, I'm really grateful for Derek inviting me to your Project Changemaker series. I was a graduate back in 1994, which meant I started Sunderland University in 1991. So Derek's kindly reminded me that's nearly 30 years ago. So that introduction of all those roles I do is just made to remind me how very old I am now. So let me walk you through Moss Bros. To give a bit of a picture, the share price of Moss Bros when we were invited to go and do this particular project was 68 pence, but that had been recovered from about 6 pence. So it was a brand that was in a bit of a forlorn state. It was certainly seen as a brand in decline, didn't really have any purpose, and needed to be refreshed and brought back to life in some ways. So the piece of work that I'm going to talk you through is how we did a strategic repositioning of the brand. One of the key things that we'd established when we'd spoken to a number of consumers was that people didn't understand where it sat. It was calling itself Moss, not Moss Bros, and I'll come on to that a little bit more later. And when we spoke to young guys about what it meant to them, that it was more akin to a rolling hill in Wales with some dodgy cafe than actually a clothing shop that they would go to. We took a lot of young men on safari tours to our competitive set, to places that they would shop to, and to really understand what was important to them. So the whole premise of this piece of work I'm going to take you through was, how did we take Moss Bros from a brand that was unloved, becoming increasingly unknown with a younger audience, to being certainly not on a radar where they'd shop, to this, and hopefully this video will play. So as you can see there, that was 2014 when we did this piece of work, and I was involved with the brand from 2013 to 2015. And the challenge very much was, how did we take this 106-year-old brand, which was certainly well respected, but had become increasingly unloved, to become a brand that not only just dressed men for the most important day of their lives, to a brand that people wanted to shop to again. It's the story of how we brought the brand up to date and what at the time the sort of prevailing zeitgeist and the mood of the nation was around men wearing suits. So as I mentioned, we did a lot of research, spoke to over 2,000 men across research groups, one-on-ones, safaris. And what they told us was, from whether it was their high school prom, which was becoming an increasingly growing trend back in 2013, right through to the wedding day, it had a lot of emotional connections. Wearing a suit was important. It was associated with them for things that they loved to do. But Moss Bros had lost that emotional connection. So even though it dressed people for their wedding days, they didn't associate Moss Bros with romance. They just associated with somewhere where they'd hire their wedding suit for that day. We were seen as a functional place, somewhere where I'd go to if I had to, usually if I was a young guy, because my mum had told me my brother was getting married and I had to go and hire my suit from there. So there was no romance associated with it as a brand. At the same time, the mood was very much changing in the UK. It was the time of Pop Idol, of X Factor, the burgeoning reality TV star. And as I mentioned, the proms, wanting to wear a suit to celebrate the end of school. And there was a TV show called Mad Men at the time, which was all about advertising in the 1950s America. And it was a real slick, suited and booted sort of feel. And these two fused sort of brands of Mad Men and X Factor had created this peacock factor, this permission to dress up. And the trend of the day was the suit is here to stay. And it's going to be interesting as we come out of COVID, as we've all sort of sat around in our joggers and t-shirts, whether or not that desire to dress up and feel special on a night out is going to come back. And I think it's a trend that you'll see reinforced. But there was certainly this idea of a superhero effect. When women go out, they talk to us about they'll put on their lippy, they'll bang on some heels, and they really want to make a statement. And for guys, it was putting on their suit. It was almost seen as a coat of armor, something that they could seize the day if they were wearing it. And where did we sit within that? Where did Moss Bros sit? Well, on all of the hygiene factors of it's a traditional brand, I've heard of it, my mum and dad talk about it, I think my dad probably shops there. It's got some expertise, it carries brands I know when we explained what those brands were, and I'll come back to that. We scored very highly, Moss Bros did well. But on emotional factors such as it's a brand I know and love, it's fashionable, it's on trend, I would recommend it to my family and friends, Moss Bros scored incredibly poorly. And that was because brand consideration is always driven by emotional factors. Everything you purchase is based on emotion. So whether you choose to have an Apple phone or you choose to have a Galaxy phone, there's something emotional that's driving you to one brand or the other, and that's why you would choose it. And Moss Bros was losing out on all of that emotion. There was nothing that was driving me to go to that brand. It was purely I was going because it would do what it said on the tin. It was functional. As I mentioned, we spoke to young men about what did they think of Moss versus Moss Bros as a brand name. And they said, well, they felt it lacked confidence to adopt Moss because actually anybody could be a Moss, but nobody could be a Moss Bros. Moss Bros actually spoke to them about heritage, about it felt like it was a family of brothers, that it must be a tailoring business. So it had lots of associations that in losing that and calling itself Moss, it wasn't getting any of that positive halo. And the brands that it carried as its own label, de Havilland, Ventuna, Blazer being some of them, were completely unidentifiable to the brand. It gave no positive halo. So even though Ventuna was quite a well-liked brand, Moss Bros didn't get any benefit from that because there was no association that Ventuna was a Moss Bros brand. So it was very much hiding its light under bushel, and its true brand identity wasn't coming to life in any shape or form. This was its offer at the time. So back in sort of 2013, it was very confused. So it had a classic good, better, best hierarchy in terms of its structure of pricing. And men tend to shop in three ways. Unlike women who will buy on things they love, men like fit, and fit is incredibly important to them. So is it a regular fit, which is a slightly baggier, boxier fit, a tailored fit, which is slightly more cut in, or a slim fit, which is a fashion fit, a very sort of skinny fit, which was very much on the up at this time. Moss Bros had all of these brands and people had no idea. So it carried brands like DKNY, it carried Ted Baker, it carried Calvin Klein, Hugo Boss, but people hadn't realised that they were within the suite of offer, a sort of a branded house offer that Moss Bros had. Added to that, it had its own mixed mash of brands. So this 1851, Savoy Tailors Guild, de Havilland, Blazer, Ventuna Italia, Ventuna 21, Performance. People just didn't know that Moss Bros had an offer and what its brands actually were. At the time, Moss Bros was selling more Ted Baker suits in its Moss Bros stores than Ted Baker was selling globally in all of its other stores. And yet people didn't realise Moss Bros sold Ted Baker. It was very, very confused and nothing sat very coherently. There was also total apathy by the consumer. It was in really the sort of worst of all worlds. People didn't know whether it existed as a result, whether it was still in business, whether it was just a hire shop. I know I can go and hire there something for the races or on my brother's wedding, but they didn't know that it was a shop they could go and get a suit from. So they were totally indifferent to it, and as a result, it was basically had no purpose that they could say this is a reason for going and shopping there. So we created one. And throughout this presentation, I'll take you through what each of these stages actually delivered for the brand. We hooked around this idea of men at the time wanted to dress up, they wanted to feel good, and they wanted to feel amazing. And so our purpose became, we make men feel amazing. And we did this across 4 key propositions of experience, looks, engagement, and expertise. And I'll walk you through them. The personality had to be friendly. Going and buying a suit is a stressful thing for a lot of particularly young men. And so they wanted to feel somewhere where they weren't going to be laughed at. It had to have expertise. They had to feel that if I'm going to spend that amount of money on an item, I can trust the people that are selling to me and they're experts in what they do. Britishness at the time was a big trend. We'd just had 2012, the Olympics. There was a real passion and a real sort of belief that British was on a resurgence. So that was an important part of our messaging. Also, this passion point that I mentioned before had to come through. We had to make people feel that there was an association between the suit that they wore and the suit where they bought it from. And the brand had to feel instinctive. It had to react to trends. And I'll give you a couple of examples later on. So the proposition was, as it said here, so from the ranges we create to the expertise we demonstrate, we ensure every man's personality comes through in the clothes that they wear. And we built this around some core components of expertise, heritage, great ranges, the curation of a suite of different brands that you could choose from, a brilliant own label, and then quality, omnichannel, and good value. The quadrants of amazing that we developed were experiences, expertise, engagement, and looks. And I'll walk you through what each of those sort of stood for the brand. So first of all, we looked at the shops. The shops were pretty grubby. They were fairly dark. They were in lots of old buildings and they hadn't had a lot of love. And part of what we knew from speaking to the research was people wanted to go into places that felt cool, that felt bright, that felt light, that felt like it was a shop that they wanted to go into. It had the right music, it had the right lighting. And so we created this new design. And you'll see there on the screen, we pulled out the heritage, so the established in 1851. We pulled out the fact it was Moss Bros, not just Moss, to reinforce the heritage point. And then we spoke about the 3 things it did. Bespoke, so you could have a suit created and tailored for you there, ready to wear, something off the peg, and hire. And we purposely put hire at the end because we knew that that's what people thought Moss Bros was. So instead of leading with hire, we ended with hire to really reinforce it was much more than just a hire business. We also then looked at the entire look, the entire offer that Moss Bros had, and we undertook a complete overhaul. So notwithstanding looking at the ranges, we also looked at slimmer fitting suits, which was very on trend. This looking at colours, so that you're probably all a bit too young to remember the launch of blue, but blue was a massive trend in 2013, and so we weaved a lot of blue into our looks. And we also created within this particular range, which is Moss London, that I'll come on to, a highly successful casual wear offer. So this was about wearing chinos with a suit jacket or a jersey with a pair of jeans, and really mixing and matching. So you saw from Billy Huxley, the model who put his suit on at the start, he was wearing his suit without socks. He wasn't wearing a tie. So we gave permission for people to wear their suit in a different way. We created within the Moss Bros stable a series of brands that absolutely lived and breathed the brand. So instead of it being Ventuno and de Havilland that I mentioned before, we created a suite that locked back to the brand. So if people liked it, the positive halo was given back to the brand. So you've got here Moss 1851. For this brand, this was all about really giving 160 years of knowledge and expertise and sort of peddling it into that sort of suit for today. So it had a very pared back aesthetic. The tailoring was very style led. It had some very nice detailing in terms of the cuffs and the buttons. And it also was a much more effortless in the way in which people could wear that suit. So they could just wear the trouser, they could just wear the jacket, they could mix and match with other elements. And our essence there was being unashamed in the love of something beautiful, all about sort of style and substance. Then we created a brand called Savo Taylor's Guild that had sat with the brand since 1906, and it was created very much because the Moss Bros had a store in the Savoy Hotel on the Strand in London, and it's still there today. So we wanted to really pull out the fact that there's some old Hollywood glamour, and not everybody that shops in Moss Bros. We wanted to be this new younger audience. We wanted to retain this 50-something and above audience as well. And so we wanted to pull on heritage, on style, luxury, this sort of pedigree of how could you weave that into every sort of garment that we created. So we hand finished all of these pieces. You'll see there on the suit some nice edging around the collar and the cuffs. So understated, but very much felt you were saying something about who you were. But if you chose to wear Savo Taylor's Guild as an older gentleman, so there's very much heritage in every stitch. We also recognised that for a lot of people, a suit is a really it's an expensive purchase. It's a purchase that the first time you make one, you're considering yourself in terms of how much you've got in your wallet. So we wanted an affordable range, and Moss Esquire was very much for that. So this was a suit that could be your main interview work suit, but it also could be your second suit that you could wear as well. And it was probably the start of a bit of fast fashion. So you could change this suit fairly regularly if you wanted to, but equally we did a range that would last for seasons. So there were trend colours as well as something that kept you sane for a number of years. So the idea here is we've done all the hard work, so you don't have to. You're dressed for all occasions. We then really wanted to pull on this tailoring, this heritage we had in terms of the brands that the history of the brand, and so we created Moss Bespoke. And you'll see here, this is the only brand where the bespoke sort of crosses the line. So you've got Moss, a line, and the sub-brand, the bespoke here, the B and the K, flicks the line. And that was trying to reinforce that this was a personal choice. This was about you picking individual elements that you wanted to put in your suit. And at the time, the only way you could get a tailored suit was going to a Savile Row and actually going to a tailor and getting it completely bespoke cut for you. Here, we allowed the consumer to come in and choose from a block. So whether that was a regular tailored or slim fitting block, you could then choose which fabric you wanted, what lining you wanted, what buttons you wanted, whether you wanted a different color thread running throughout the stitching. You could have your initials put in it. So it was a real personalized suit, a bit like a Nike ID. If you want to go and get your trainers done there, this was the same idea for a suit. And then that was taken away and it was made for you. And then 2 to 4 weeks later, that suit would be made and you could come and pick it up. So it was a real special sort of part of the offer, and really emphasised the heritage of the brand. So it was very much designed by you, but tailored by us. So a real sort of loud shout as a brand. The other thing about Moss Bros is it had this huge heritage in being born in Covent Garden at a time when Covent Garden was the coolest part in town. It's where people went to shop. It's where people hung out. If you went to be seen. And it was still an important location for Moss Bros. It was our biggest store. We had tailors downstairs. Pretty much 70% of people who went to Ascot would come to Covent Garden store to get to hire their black tie for the day. So it was a great brand for us. And we wanted to fuse black tie and hire with that heritage. So we created Moss Covent Garden, and this was very much about formal attire, but being cool to wear. So you could wear this anytime you wanted to, and it was like a second skin. And the idea was we own the dress code, feel comfortable, feel safe, wear it when you want. So the creation of those ranges, those Moss ranges within the Moss Bros offer, made it very clear where we sat and where we sat against the competition within the brand. So we still maintained a good, better, best and a prestige range across those 3 fits of regular, tailored and slim. But we made it very clear that the prestige range were these really exceptional suits. So the Canales, fine Italian cloth, mainly in cashmere, utterly beautifully made by the family over in Italy. Hugo Boss, a very well-known, highly respected fashion house that we would also create the best of their range, and Calvin Klein as their really clean line that they had for slim fitting suits. So that was our prestige range. But then within the best, better and good, we sat Moss very clearly with where we saw it being as good as the competition. So Moss Bespoke always sat across our best offer. So if you wanted to go and have something special, something hand touched, something hand designed, then you could create that across any of those fits and you'd pay a price point for that. But for Savoy Tailor's Girls, that would play in the same space as a Zegna suit, which again, a very fine Italian cloth, the same quality, the same level of expertise in the design of those suits. For our 1851 range, we were very much putting that in the same space as Ted Baker. Moss Bros also design a lot of the suits for Ted Baker as well. So we were almost giving all of our halo to Ted Baker and not retaining any of it for Moss Bros itself. So we very much put a lot of attention into developing our 1851 offer to complement a Ted Baker offer. And there was often ways in which you could mix and match those ranges as well. And we created within Slim a Moss London range. And this was very much about creating a range that young people could identify with. So it had to have attitude. It had to feel like it was meeting a fashionable need, but it also needed to be something that I could wear to work. I could wear to my prom. I could wear for my graduation. And we put a lot of work into Moss London, and Billy Huxley, who I'll come back to on the start of the video, helped us design that range. So it was really edgy in some of the features. Within the better range, we then, other than French Connection, which is a partner brand, everything became Moss. We didn't take any other brands in there. So that was our, if you want a great suit at a great price, then you can come to Moss Bros and you're going to get that. And if actually you want an entry level price in that sort of good price point, then we've got a Squire for you. We've got a range of 1851 and we've got a range of Moss London. So the idea very much was to create a very clear offer. In terms of the creating amazing expertise, I've mentioned Bespoke. We created something called the Suit Expert, and we took all of our colleagues through an opportunity to be able to do the bespoke experience, so be able to actually take a customer through a journey to design their own suit. And this was a fairly highly skilled course, but it gave everybody who went through the course a real sense of expertise and a real sense that they were trained to a tailoring level that they wouldn't expect from a high street brand. So we really brought that sort of bespoke experience to an affordable price point, but to colleagues who could deliver it feeling really proud of what that offer was. And as a result, the internal teams became incredibly engaged with the opportunity to become a suit expert. We also looked at ways of creating moments for the brand that we call shock and awe. Back in 2014, same-sex marriage legislation was just coming into the UK. And I spoke to Attitude magazine, who's the leading gay magazine publication in the UK, and asked them what they were doing. And they hadn't really got an idea about it. And so we came up with a concept, which was, why wouldn't Moss Bros dress the people who were getting married that year for the most important day of their lives that they've been doing for 8 generations already? Why wouldn't we dress both grooms for that campaign? And at the time, on X Factor was a band called Union J, and Jamie up there, one of the male models, was the lead singer, and him and his fiance Ollie were getting married, and so we decided to create a Mr. and Mr. Campaign, and we put again this into 140 shop windows. We did a coffee table book with attitude, and we dressed everybody, all the guests, in Moss Bros outfits. And it was really made a statement. It created massive market disruption. People were surprised that Moss Bros was at the forefront of this conversation. No other brands were talking about same-sex marriage in this way. And coincidentally, our results, we were having some great results coming out. I think our share price had hit about 112 at this point, and the FT ran it as their lead, saying there's something happening at Moss Bros. So this idea of shock and awe really created momentum. We absolutely wanted to change perception. So this is Billy. When Billy walked in on the first day of the shoot, he hit absolutely every expectation. So when we asked him why he wanted to get involved. So Billy was the male model of the moment. Very red beard, doesn't come across in this photo. Hipster from Shoreditch, heavily tattooed. In fact, every time we did a shoot with him, we had to check which new tattoos he'd had to make sure we got the photos right, just in case there were any cutovers. But he really sort of made a statement about who Moss Bros were and what we were trying to achieve. And what Billy said to us is he didn't just want to be the face of a brand. He wanted to help us design the brand. And so he was involved in how you'd put looks together and how we'd create different campaigns with him in. And the way in which that video we showed you right at the start came about was just sitting down with him and saying, Billy, we've got some new Moss London underpants. Show us how you would dress into a suit. You put a suit on as you would wear it. And we just filmed it. And that video, it cost us, with music from a great surf dude I know down in Australia called Kid Mac, it costs £5,000. And we had over 1 million hits on YouTube. And we went viral from brands in America through to channels down in Australia calling us to ask us about this campaign. It was just something very different for a brand at the time. So that's all sort of retail and our bespoke ranges, but hire was still an important part of our business, and we didn't want to lose hire. It was 20% of the business comes from hire, but we wanted to transform this fairly wooden, traditional looking sense of what hire is for people's wedding days with real experiences. And so we ran a competition where we basically said to people to send in their photos of their wedding day, of how they wore their hire outfits. And the two photos on the right-hand side, sorry, should be, apologies for the left-hand side not coming back, were very different from this sort of very staid look. And the competition was very much around the idea of a reportage. So in the moment, how it really is. And we ran, people who sent in for this, their weddings became our campaign literature, and we reimbursed them for their hire wear. And it was a really great campaign to really create movement. We also had to ensure that all of the campaign activity we did were of the moment. They had relevancy to what was going on. So as I mentioned, blue was huge at the time, and nobody would think you could go to Moss Bros and get a modern blue suit. So we had very much created campaigns that drove modernity and did some very interesting tie-ups with holiday brands or different sort of locations where people could go and wear their suits. So the Bold in Blue was an Antigua holiday that people could win by just buying their suit from Moss Bros, but it changed people's perceptions. We also wanted to explain how fit was important and how you should choose your fit. So we created a lot of literature on our online channels and also in store, so people could explain how they could choose their suit with the suit expert, or they could bespoke design it. We also wanted to raise the awareness of the different brands. So the hashtag New York, hashtag London was all about Moss Bros, DKNY, Ted Baker. So really explaining all the different brands. And then importantly, we wanted to get into the proms market, which was huge at the time. It was starting to really grow to be a trend, and Moss Bros weren't anywhere. So Moss London was introduced to really own that market, and we did some really compelling offers around, a slim fit suit with a shirt and tie for 129. So the price point was amazing, the colours were amazing, the fit was amazing, and we became the #1 performing brand in the proms sector. So real seasonality. And in amongst all of this, we really brought to life omni-channel. At the time, omni-channel was a real sort of what you see now. You can buy online, pick up in store, but have delivered home. That wasn't a thing in 2013. So we introduced omni-channel into the business as well to enable all of that personality and sort of opportunity for the store. So what happened? The new store design generated double-digit sales growth. It outperformed every internal metric, whether that was colleague engagement scores, whether that was brand association scores, places where I would shop. We certainly created media buzz. We had regularly 1 million hits across the campaigns. We had much younger, edgier models, much more a strong YouTube channel at the time. Instagram, believe it or not, wasn't a thing back then, but a real sort of social buzz. The same-sex marriage was a transformational story for the brand. We created that e-commerce platform, and we traded in over 10 countries from a standing start, and our brand perception scores increased by 7% in a year. Most importantly, colleagues were really excited to work for the brand again. And on a personal level, we saw the brand over the 2 years of doing this project move the share price from 68 pence to 115 pence, which is great from a numbers game. But the most important thing was when you mention Moss Bros to people, they had positive things to say about it. They were genuinely excited to see a brand that they thought was likely to die to come back to life with such interesting and innovative campaigns. So let's see if this last video will play. There we go.
Jemima, that amazing presentation. I'd seen the slides before, but I must admit the way that you identified the different characters, the models and the different styles, that just, a lot of that went over my head initially, but you explained it very well, very informative. I'm going to open it up to questions now, but I'll start off. But if you want to ask a question, simply just put your hand up and we'll bring you in. So Moss Bros established 1851, and I was just thinking while you were presenting, that's 30 years before Coca-Cola, Avon Products, Yale Lock, Cosmopolitan Magazine. So they've gone through huge ups and downs. But my question is, how did you secure the deal? Because,
you know what? It's a great story, this, Derek. And the power of this is networks, and always stay in contact with everybody. So I at the time I was the brand director at the co-op. I was a brand director at the co-op, and I'd left the co-op and I'd gone on to do some other things. I'd set up my own consultancy, which at the time was called J Bird Consulting, now Hello Finch, and I'd gone out for dinner with my former chief exec Martin Beaumont, and explained to him that I was setting up this consultancy. And he said to me, "That, that's interesting. Good luck with it." And the next day, he was out for lunch with my former marketing director, who had also worked for him, CMO, a lady called Zoe Morgan, a brilliant marketer who I learned everything from, and said, "Oh, Jay's setting up her own consultancy." And she was going out for dinner that evening with my former CFO at the co-op, Paul Hewitt. And she said, "Oh, Jay's setting up this new consultancy." And he went home and he spoke to his wife, Debbie Hewitt, who was chairman of Moss Bros, and said, who called me up and said, "Hi, Jemima, it's Debbie Hewitt here, Paul's wife. I hear from Paul, from Zoe, from Martin, that you're setting up your own consultancy. We want to do something with Moss Bros. Do you want to come and have a chat with us?" And so it came about because I'd, over 5 years, kept relationships going with people from a great job who'd really loved and nurtured my career, and I'd made sure that I stayed in contact with them. And if I hadn't have done any of that, I'd have never have got the Moss Bros gig. So it's a great one for keeping in touch.
Yeah, very, very interesting. Just before I hand over to you guys, I've just got one more question, so bear with me. What advice would you give to our students with regards to personal branding when it comes to employability interviews?
Yeah, it's a great one, isn't it? I mean, I tell you what, all I can say as a start of a 10, Derek, is I am glad social media did not exist when I was at Sunderland University, because there are far too many photographs in the royalty of me looking worse for wear that I'm glad I'm not all over a Facebook channel, albeit people have got a habit now of finding them and posting them. You know what? I think the most important thing is authenticity. Be yourself, be real, and be confident in what you've done. There's nothing that anybody has done in terms of the choices they've made that were necessarily the wrong ones. Everything leads you on a journey, and if you can explain your story, then authenticity always shines through. So that's the personal brand for me, is be who you say you are, don't be who you think you are.
Okay, thank you. I'll start. I think Grace got a hand up there first. So Grace, if you unmute and ask the question to Jemima.
Thank you. Hiya, Jemima. I had
Hi,
a
great.
look the Hello Finch website before, just
Yeah.
to have a little look to see kind of what you did. It just seems really interesting, so I'm just kind of wondering like how you actually got into that.
Yeah, it's a great question, Grace. So what happened was, so I'd spent a lot of my, I spent the first half of my career, basically, I'm a greengrocer from Barnsley. I'm actually an accidental marketeer. So I was sort of running shops for the first half of my sort of 10 years, and then went into a head office role, got involved in projects, and one of these projects turned into effectively a marketing project. And that's how I ended up in marketing. And what, I guess because I didn't have a traditional marketing upbringing from university or my career, I sort of realized that a lot of agencies, they're not necessarily authentic or honest, and they don't tell you what they should be doing, what they're really doing. They're often subbing it out. And so I thought, well, wouldn't it be fun to create an agency which was true to the customer as well as the agency? And so instead of white labeling an offer, I would actually create Hello Finch, which was a front door. And then for every client, we'd bespoke develop their own individual agency. So if it was a design need, we'd bring you in a design partner. But when it moved to a creative need, the design partner would roll off and we'd bring you in a creative partner or a PR partner or an employee engagement partner. But at each stage, you would know who that partner was. So instead of it always being Hello Finch, we'd actually tell you it was Studio Blackburn because they're absolutely brilliant at design and they work on design the best way, or it's Roast because they're absolutely brilliant at digital and what you need is a digital partner. And so the idea behind Hello Finch is using the best of the independent agency network, all of whom I've worked with in one shape or form, and created a super sort of independent agency that brands from startups to multinationals can come to get bespoke elements. Hope that answers it, Grace.
It does. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Thanks very much, Grace. I'll forgive me if I'm not picking you in the correct order, but Amy, would you like to go next?
Yeah, please, thank you. So I found your presentation, really insightful. Like as a marketing student, it's very interesting to see how your product range, that like the marketing efforts for it differed slightly for each one, and it was interesting to see sort of how that was successful for that specific product range. I was just wondering, so you used a mix of like traditional and then what I would say modern marketing efforts. I was just wondering, do you think because you used like a balance, that was sort of one of the more successful ways that you implemented the campaign, or would you say that like you preferred to use one method over the other?
I think it's I prefer a fusion, Amy, of channels. And I think you're talking channels there. Correct me if I'm wrong in terms of, you know, whether it's print, whether it's press, whether it's digital. I think what's happened in recent years is there's been a real move to digital is everything, and digital is brilliant. The immediacy of digital is awesome. The fact that you can do A/B testing very quickly, and you can see what's working, you can choose where to put your spend, where not to spend. That's all amazing. But digital is just a channel. It's just another way of getting your message out there. And if you think about digital, particularly now, everything's digital. So TV is digital. I can make sure that you're watching a different ad on ITV 7 o'clock, 7:30 than Derek's watching, based on what you're watching, what your experiences are, and I can bespoke add that. That's still television advertising. It's just with a digital lens. Over 80% of out of home is now digital. It just means I can put a digital. I can just change my ads more quickly. At the time that we didn't have that, but I wanted to test as many different channels to see where we were getting the pickup. And I think that fusion of traditional and modern certainly worked. Does that answer it, Amy? Is that where you were
that's
looking?
great. Yeah, thank you.
Awesome.
Thanks very much, Amy. Jake, would you like to ask a question?
Hi there, Jemima. Thank you for that.
Hi, Jake.
Hiya. I liked the presentation. I saw in the videos that you showed that it ended with London. I was just wondering, especially with businesses such as Nissan, highlighting the fact that their cars are made in Sunderland, and that's a really important point for them. Is there any sort of idea of designing outfits from highlighting them as from specific areas, sort of like Sunderland or Yorkshire or something like that? It's just London has been seen as the more London-centric sort of business area, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, I think I do, Jake. Yeah, it's a really great question. So at the time, so this is 2013, 2014, we just had 2012. The Olympics was a massive success. And the way in which the UK and particularly London had put on those games was seen as a really big, a real big success story. Also, London, the resurgence of London as a fashion centre of cool dudes wearing cool clothes with cool music was really, really of the moment. And so we wanted, when we're creating that sort of fashion fit brand for Moss London, we wanted to pick up all that zeitgeist, that mood, and that's why that's very much a Moss London theme feature of the time. But you're absolutely right. I think now, if we look at it, could you create ranges that pick up a genre, pick up an attitude? Absolutely. So I think, there's a real, Northern Powerhouse has slightly been put on a back burner because of COVID, but there's a real Manchester theme. There's a Manchester edge now. There's certainly a Yorkshire sort of edge going on. So there's definitely something we would look at, but at the time it was all about maximising and getting the halo of London.
Fantastic. Thank you very much for that.
You're welcome.
Thank you for that. Emmanuel, did you want to ask a question? You had your hand up, but it doesn't look as though it's up there any longer. Yorgos, over to you.
Yes. Hello, Jemima. Thanks for your
Hi, Yorgos.
presentation. It was very effective and informative. It was very good. I just have like
Great.
two small questions. The first one is, how can we identify tendencies in the early stage? And if you, maybe this is a confidential stuff, but if you have like some methodology to identify them in order to maximize profit in the future. And second question is, which personal habits do you have that you feel help you the most in the professional environment?
Could I'll definitely come back to the second one. I just had a bit of a bad line. Identify what to drive profits.
Identify how to identify new tendencies in an early stage.
Yeah,
If you have any methodology in your company that helps you do it, if it's a feeling thing, just catching, seeing what's around.
Yep, absolutely. You know what? So this is where social media is absolutely brilliant. If you follow particularly Instagram, I've found more so than Twitter of late. If you can find some channels that are futurologists that are looking at new trends. So one of the ways in which fashion follows trends is look at what's happening to buildings. And about 20 years after a building design comes out, you'll see that trend come through in fashion. It's usually about a 20-year delay. So anytime now, and you're starting to see this more slightly relaxed, casual, less sort of tight-fitting suit. That's as a result of things like the Gherkin building. So the architectural design of that building is much more flamboyant. So you'll see more flamboyancy coming in. You'll see slightly more relaxed outfits. But equally, very quickly after that, you had the Shard. So that trend will probably only last for about 18 months, maybe 2.5, 3 years at max, before you start getting this sharpness back. So where things start fitting you slightly more, more closely. And this works for men and women. And if you look at architecture, it's a very good proxy for what's coming down the line in fashion. Now, that's just one example. I'm talking specifically fashion there. But you can look at that in futurologists and brands that specialize in this. They'll be talking about things that are they're going to start flowing and coming through, and they're talking 5 to 10 years time. So what you'll see accelerated right here, and this is because of COVID, is hyper-localism. So you'll start to see local and people shopping locally because they've got used to it, but you'll get hyper-localism where people are finding the best cheese that's in the Northwest and choosing that producer, but actually then because of the internet and the ability to actually get that delivered, they'll be using that in London. So London's hyper local isn't just going to be London, it's going to be hyper local from really specialist providers around the country. So hyper localism is a trend you'll see. So yeah, I'd look at that sort of thing. In terms of personal habits, crikey, it was personal habits in terms of how I present myself, or personal habits in terms of what I do?
Personal habits as some personal activity that you usually do, you know?
Yeah,
or
so I come back to my authenticity point. Yeah,
Okay.
I'm authentic in everything I do. So whether I'm on my Hello Finch Twitter account, which I don't massively use, or my at JPD26 personal account, I am who I am across all of my different channels. I don't pretend to be anybody else to who I am on my LinkedIn profile. So yes, I'll have a more professional page on LinkedIn, but actually on my Twitter accounts or my Instagram accounts, you're still seeing the same Jemima. And I think having a thread of authenticity is the most important attribute, personal attribute you can have.
Okay, thanks very much. The answers were very good. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that. We'll squeeze one more question in. Had I?
Hello.
Hi, Adi.
You've mentioned before that you think that post-COVID will get like formal. We will get back to the formal situation. You've also mentioned the visions that led you to get like accomplishments because of the World Cup and other events that you used. Like how can we predict, and I know that it may be sometimes risky to go for your prediction and follow your prediction. Like what leads you to read and be like comfortable and let's say less risky? What circumstances?
Yeah, it's such a great question, Heidi. So number one is Twitter is an echo chamber if you allow it to be an echo chamber. Instagram is an echo chamber if you allow it to be. So recognizing when you're in one is the most important thing you can do. There is so much information and there's so much nonsense out there. And it's important, whether it's a political divide or it's a cultural debate or something that's happened on COVID, to be ensured that you're listening to both echo chambers. So the people who are pro-Brexit, the people who are anti-Brexit. It's important to listen to both sides of the debate, because if you fall into just listening and viewing yourself and experiencing life through one lens, then you won't see trends, because all you're getting played back to you is the same orchestra. You're just hearing the same mood music. And in order to, I believe, and what I try to do, is engage with a plethora of media to understand the debates on all sides, to allow me to think, okay, that's where I think the trend is coming from, or that's the opinion I want to take. So whether it's an opinion or a trend, I try to look at the whole round rather than stay in an echo chamber. I fail a little bit on Instagram because I'm a bit of a running junkie and I just tend to talk about running all the time. But hey, that's me just being my thing.
Thank you very much. I've got one last question, and it's been on my mind since I first spoke to you and you sent your bio in. Now, you manage a ton of clients, right? and my experience from client management, they're like babies. They want your time all of the time. How do you fit in? How many is it? 5 marathons, and you've got one planned for this year, possibly. How do you balance that?
Yeah, it's a good one. I run first thing in the morning, so I'm usually sort of on the road by about 6:37 on a bad day. I do all of my training first thing, and that allows me to basically freshen my head, clear the view. You always feel you sometimes lay in bed and you think, I don't know whether I've got time to. If I don't know whether I want to get up, but you never regret getting up for a run when you've got back. And once I'm back, I very much schedule time in my diary, Derek. And I think this is something all the students can learn for. I'll book time in to do email. I'll book time in to do calls as if it's a meeting, and I'll book time in for myself, whether that's to read an article or to post something. Because if you don't protect your time, somebody will always steal it, and clients will definitely always steal your time if you don't protect it.
Yeah, we have a similar approach. Yes, definitely. Jemima Bird, thank you very much for a truly highly informative presentation. And I will keep in touch with you, and I'm sure that the university will work very closely with you in the near future and further afield.
Yeah, good luck to all the students as well. It's a great university. I have a lot of fun memories.
Yeah, thank you. If the students would stay on, because I've got a couple of things I need to mention about Project Game Changer.
See you, Derek. Bye now.
Take care.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
everyone. Bye.
Thank you.
Right. Now, back to Project Changemaker. Any questions that you would like to ask? Anything about the video? I am going to send out an email or a communication about the 60-second video presentation. But are there any questions that you would like to know about what it needs to, the structure of it, or the virtual placements? Grace.
Hi, yeah, just a little bit more information on the actual placements, if you can, please.
Right. Well, we have over 15 organisations that have expressed a preference to recruit our students. And what I want to also do is I want to commend the students, your attendance, and also the interaction that you have at the end of the presentations. You know, we welcome that. But what we're going to do is the process. I'm going to sit down with Laura from the Futures team, Deborah Storer from the Faculty of Business and Law, and Joe Dan from the Silver Fund, who's organised the finances for this initiative. And what we're going to do is we're going to look at your presentations and we're going to try and match you with a suitable organisation. Now, with the placement, if, for example, I keep using yesterday I used the example of pharmacy. Because you're a pharmacy student, we may not fit you with a pharmacy organisation, because what we want you to do is use your skill set, your generic skill set on placement, but to develop other skills, other experiences. And by doing that, you'll come out a stronger individual. So, you know, hopefully, you know, I wish you all well with the, you know, getting through to the 15 placements, virtual placements. But once you get to phase 2, we'll be able to talk to you more specifically about the organisation which you're being fitted with.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Is that Irish?
Yes, Irish. Hi. The placements are supposed to be like half a day. How would you like explain that? Because like some of us have classes.
Sure. What it'll be a process of negotiation with the employer, and you might say in your schedule, well, I'm free on a Tuesday morning or a Thursday afternoon. It'll be one of compromise within that, and that half day placement can change around your schedule. You know, you may have a part-time job, or you may have, you know, coursework which you need to attend. So you'll keep in regular contact with your university mentor and your mentor inside the organisation, but it is one of flexibility.
Okay, thank you.
Any more questions? Yeah, thank you very much for that. We appreciate it. And a special thanks to the unsung heroes. We have Deborah Beinman from the Faculty of Business and Law, Laura Hope from the Futures team, and also, I don't know if she's on the audience today, Joe Dan team, who's organised the Silver Fund on behalf of the university. A big investment, but I'm sure that you will all grow by connecting. Tomorrow's afternoon's Wednesday's guest lecture is by Stuart Junk, who talks about how he exited the University of Sunderland and climbed the banking ladder to be very successful, a very successful individual. So I hope you can all tune in tomorrow. Don't forget, at the end of tomorrow, we will release one of the guest lectures presentations, a recording, and then we'll have Thursday we have Gary Watson from the International Firefighting Division of Serco. A very exciting presentation, very informative about employability. So I'm sure you'll all glean benefit from that. So thank you very much for all tuning in, and I shall speak to you later. Take care and goodbye.